Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Birdbrain podcast. You'll notice that there is no episode 1, which is really the Derevi in 2024 video, which is not titled the Birdbrain podcast because we are good at this. Anyways, I'm Jay Collins and I've got here Envy and Clay. Please say hello.
Hey, SemVCon.
Hey, it's Clay Q again.
We are at least some of the more prominent Derevi tournament grinders in North America. We recently all met up actually at the largest CEDH tournament in recorded history, the Cowtown Throwdown in Columbus, Ohio, hosted by Top Deck GG. How'd we do?
I wish I could have done better. I went 1-3-1 in the event. It was a bit rough. It was a rough event.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would agree. I went 1-4. Did drop after day 1 because obviously at 5 points, not going to be getting there on day 2. It was definitely the hardest field I've been in, and I've been to almost 20 tournaments this year. That was a very stacked field. That said, I love a challenge, so I still really appreciated it. Had a lot of good opponents, had some not so good opponents, but that's a tournament, you know? You're down in the gulags. How'd you do, Clay?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I did so bad I honestly can't even remember how bad I did. It was not a great set of a weekend for me. I think I had 2 wins if I remember right, and then some draws and a bunch of losses. I played the first 6 of the 7 rounds, and a lot of my games were honestly lost to myself throughout the weekend. I miscounted mana, missequenced, and lost because of it. I had at least one scenario where if I had simply tapped Derevi to convoke my Court of Calling, I would have had an extra mana and I would have won. But because I tapped my Mana Dork instead, I lost. So missequences, bad plays. It was a rough weekend, but it was a lot of fun, and I look forward to the next one.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
I know at least I'll be at the Top Deck Open in August at the same place. Are you either of you attending?
I don't think I'm gonna play in the event, but I will be there. Right now it's sold out, I think still, but you never know. It's still a month away, so
True.
we'll.
It's obviously a much further drive or flight for Clay, being from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I'm looking for stuff a little closer to home right now. As you know, I've got some personal life stuff going on, so I unfortunately won't see you there. But good luck.
It's quite all right. Did we? So you mentioned you had a couple mistakes. Also, I didn't realize you had 2 wins. Good shit, man.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't.
But
I just found my scores. It was 2 draws and then losses. As I said, I couldn't even remember what I did at the tournament. It's all been blurring together. So
fair. Well, I take back my congratulations.
Oh.
I don't mind it. As I said, most of my losses were quite literally to myself. I had an epic game with my opponent having all 3 channel answers.
It's rough, yeah.
How?
Do we have any notable lines that we pulled off during the event that maybe you want to share with the listener?
Yeah. The one line, or the one win I did have, it was with the Nadu birthing pod line, where it's a new line that we've been talking about for a little bit. If you have a 2-drop, a birthing pod, and Derevi in play, and 6 mana, you can win with that on board. You can birthing pod your 2-drop. In my case, I had a Bloom Tender, which made it even better. I potted my Bloom Tender into Nadu. I attacked with Derevi. You untap the pod, then you sack Derevi, go get Feldar Guardian, you flicker the pod, you then activate Derevi, putting it into play, untap a land, and then you pod your Derevi away again, and then go get a Phyrexia Metamorph. Or I'm now on another 4-mana clone. We'll get into that later. All you need is a 4-mana clone, and then you have it enter as a Feldar Guardian, and then you flicker each other. This triggers Nadu infinite times. It lets you draw your deck, puts all your lands into play. I was able to win through that without having to cast a spell. It was really nice.
What was the actual outlet that allowed you to eliminate your opponents?
I am on Blind Obedience loops, so I just cast an Eternal Witness, and then snapped Eternal Witness with Blind Obedience. That's just the way I have with that. That's my current post-combat win in my list. It's really layered, and it works fairly well in my case. Most of the time, people don't want to exile Eternal Witness or snap, so I typically have all those pieces.
Very fair. My
I
notable
like
line was actually a misplay. It was really fun until I realized that I completely botched it. So I'm on Trinisphere, as some people might know. Long live the 3-ball. 3-ball was in play, and this was against Dio of the Bufftown Bullies, actually, in my round 1. He was on Sisay. But there was a Izzet Pirates that had Kitesail Larcenist my Derevi into a treasure, and I had 3 lands up. And I was holding a Fierce Guardianship in hand, and a spell went on the stack that I was trying to counter. Fun fact, the treasure that Derevi is at that point is still your commander. You can still cast Fierce Guardianship for free, should Trinisphere not be in play. But I sacrificed the Derevi to itself, activating the treasure, and then my 3 lands to flash Derevi back in. And then I tapped down the Trinisphere, and I cast Fierce Guardianship for free. And the Lavinia in play countered the spell. I was very silly. But is a trick I have up my sleeve for later, for sure.
If you had just paid the mana instead of reactivating Derevi into play, you would have got there?
Absolutely, yes. And I actually thought that as I said this out loud. I feel very silly, even still. But that's quite all right.
I don't. My best play line was losing to the triple channel. Honestly, I set myself up with a Worldly Tutor for an Emil and an E-Zone play, and just couldn't get there. There's a Dockside in play to clone. I think the base value if everyone sacked was like 7 or 8 mana, and people didn't want to sack because they didn't think it was going to get there. Another player revealed a brain freeze, thinking he could threaten to mill my Emil off the top, and I just kind of didn't care because I was just going to draw it with Fairy Mastermind, and it just didn't work out with a Turtle, an Otawara, and a Beseju to stop me from.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Sky Turtle is a lot better than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
It was Otawara stopped me on the turn of, so I set the turn up to do it when they put their Sisay activation on the stack. We passed the turn, they put their Sisay activation on the stack, tapped themselves, mostly come down. So that I went from there. They had Otawara in hand, still able to cast it. Channel it. And Sky Turtle with the last of their mana to Otawara me a second time. Or not Otawara, Beseju me a second time. So it was like, where did you... Yeah. One player, all the answers, everyone else locked out and just could not get there with an overwhelming board state. It sucked. So...
Fair. At least, even though we didn't have the best result at this one event, we did get to meet up, and we had a 4-person Derevi pod for $300 that I put up, actually, as a reward. Interesting format. It was first to 2 wins, which, seems good for distributing money on paper, but that's a lot of bird. It took us quite some time. We only ended up playing 2 games even.
It was after playing 5 rounds of Swiss and then doing stuff, and then I think we met up at 8 o'clock, and then we were playing until 10, 11 o'clock. It was a bit.
It was. However,
it was fun.
You did win one of them. Our 4th was John Graham, also goes by Astro. He's got a Derevi list as well in the back pocket. He's normally a Blue Farm player. He's a friend of mine. Great player. So that's why I wanted him in there as well. He picked up the first... No. Yeah, he picked up
Yeah,
the first game with Clone Matic Aura relines, and then you picked up the second game with Nadu Nomads, which we can talk about in a little bit.
yeah,
But you
it was,
split the prize, and each of you walked away with $150 of my money.
yeah. It was pretty interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit of a Nomads hater in the beginning, and ironically, it's really good. It's very good.
I'm glad I could bring this joy to many a bird player because regular, and again, we'll get into this when we cover Nadu, but regular Nadu can't run Nomads being a white card. So I think it's the one
Yeah.
thing that we have over them in that scenario. They've got a lot more consistency as their deck is entirely built around it, but as far as a value engine goes, Nomads, just the Encores in general, are king.
There is two combo synergies that are going to come up as we're talking about this, talking about Cowtown, talking about all these cards, talking about Nadu, that I think we really need to highlight, and that's the Felidar clone and the clone Derevi. We kind of do the same thing with Preston with the Ori and the cloning Derevi that way, and but the Felidar clone is so good with so many things we can do, like with Preston in play. I mean, Preston Felidar we already know wins, but the clone can be used to activate that loop if you don't already have it, or you've got them in awkward situations. The clone, for me, running Elishnorn Mother of Machines, I almost pulled that off in our Bird Pod list with Elishnorn in play and just clone Felidar. With Nadu in play, it flips your deck. It is an incredible combo and a use of our clones because we have two very unique, repeatable abilities. So that's a combo I wanted to highlight there.
Yeah.
It's the
And
one you won with.
Yeah. I ended up winning with the. I think I had like a really crazy opening hand too. Like I think I had a mulligan to 6, and I had like 5 mana, a Thrasios, and a Nomads, and that was like my hand, and then a top deck of Quarter Calling, and then I just went to the races from there.
yeah, I
It was
remember we basically had to gang up on you, and you still got there.
yeah, it was crazy. Um, Before we move on to some new interesting cards, were there any like interesting decks you remember seeing at Cowtown? Because we were talking about like the how like the meta was starting to change with MH3 and stuff like that. I ran into like I think I ran into two not because ironically I cut Deafening Silence from my list because I thought I was gonna run into more Nadu than Roxai, and I ran into two Nadu and two Roxai in my that whole thing. But I didn't. Other than that, I didn't run into anything like crazy.
I did run into 3 separate Grixis Pirates lists, 2 of in the same game. And I don't have any Grixis Pirates players up here in Michigan, so that was an interesting thing to learn.
Yeah, I had one also. I had Grixis Pirates in my first pod.
Yeah, round 4, it was Grixis Pirates, Zerli Enchanter, Derevi. It was like, oh, this is a weird pod. But before we move on to evaluating some Modern Horizons 3 cards, because that set came out recently, I do want to just point out that we have beautiful new Derevi art coming in Bloomburrow. And I'm sorry, Clay, I'm cutting you off here, but you can give your Cowtown. My bad.
I was just gonna say, what I noticed about Cowtown is a lot of Grixis, whether it was Rogsai or Tavesh Crom or Grixis Pirates.
It was a fast meta for sure.
Grixis was definitely where the meta was. There was a lot of people trying to be there in that meta, but if I had to do a breakdown, Grixis was the meta game right now.
Yeah, that's. I know there was like a lot of people like flew into the event too. It was a very big event. The top deck had like we had like famous people. There was uh Wounded Satellite was there. I think he was on Canon. Comedian was there.
Yeah, I'm seeing 4 of the
Freedom
top
Waffle.
16 decks were in Grixis, so literally 25% of the conversions.
Yeah. My friend Corey actually was in the finals pod. Yeah, he was on Blue Farm, and he was the one who almost went for the win, and then got Sky Turtled by Ian.
I will also note, so 4 straight Grixis decks, 4 blue farms, and then 3 Sisseys, which obviously can include Grixis lines if you, especially if you're in the clam chowder variant.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, like 11 out of 16 decks in the top 16, including Grixis of some form. That's, not insignificant. It's probably the
Grixis has
best
a lot
color
of spots.
combination in CDH currently. So not surprised that a lot of pilots brought that to a top tier event.
Yeah, Blue Farm is actually really good into it. I can't remember what actually won the event. Was Blue Farm won the event, or was that
Blue Farm.
yeah,
It was indeed Blue Farm. Isaac Smith on Blue
yeah.
Farm, yeah.
It's very good in an open meta.
Yeah. I mean, it's the number 1 deck for a reason.
Yeah. But just trying to see, I was surprised, how bad actually Nadu did at the event too. Everyone, especially how
Everyone
well
was
it's been doing, post Cowtown. It's been doing
ready for
actually
it.
fairly well post Cowtown.
It's also incredibly popular too. So you get people that convert on it, but you also get people that pick up the deck, and maybe it's because it's so new. I mean, Cowtown was less than a month after Nadu's release. Maybe you don't have the practice or reps on it to actually, maybe understand some of the more complicated lines. But who knows? I'm not a Nadu pilot. I'm a different
Nadu
bird
was
wizard.
the boogeyman. Yeah, Nadu was the boogeyman for Cowtown. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was planning for it. I don't think it mattered how good your Nadu list was or how good your Nadu lines were. I don't think you were going to win with Nadu at Cowtown. Just everyone
Yeah.
was ready for it. And because of that, I think we got some additional hate because with Nadu's printing, a lot of our lines with nomads became secret Nadu lists. And I think that as Nadu fades, we're just going to prove that we do it better, and we're going to start winning with it.
Yeah, I think that's also fair. I think sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a sec. I do think it's also a very powerful deck. It's very consistent. I think it also falls into the Winota hole too, though. It's very commander reliant, and we see how well Winota's doing right now. It's not.
Yeah, you remove
And
Nadu over and over again, and that deck will not do anything.
yeah. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with that problem.
Nope, you remove Nadu, we got other plans.
All right.
Well, with that said, shall we move into our Modern Horizons 3 evaluation for Derevi?
Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Go for it.
First up on our list, we have Fanatic of Ronus, a 2-mana green mana dork. It normally taps for 1 green, which seems incredibly slow. But it also has Ferocious, add 4 green, and if you can only use it if you have a creature with power 4 or greater. And then you can eternalize it, and it's a 1/4. It's got a big booty. Personally, I think this is a great blocker. And then, obviously, this goes infinite with Emil, our favorite enabler. Emil itself has 4 power. You can put this, if it's in your graveyard, you can Soul Cauldron it, put it on anything. The 4 power restriction does come with it. Ferocious being in italics is just a flavor text word, essentially. It's not a real keyword. Or if you're not on Cauldron lines, or you just want to eternalize it, you can then exile it out of your graveyard, make a 4/4, which then turns itself on because you then control a 4 power creature. Also, the art is kind of sick on the token. I got to pick one up because it's like a zombie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Are you running this? Do you find success with it? What are your thoughts?
Give me a sec.
Personally, I'm on it, but I've only had 1 game with it actually relevant so far, and I was under a blood moon, so it wasn't the best testing environment for it. But I do really like it. It's a good Tymna blocker. Doesn't have reach or anything, so you can't block like a pesky Fairy Mastermind or anything like that. But Bowmasters isn't killing this thing anytime soon, and it's pretty rough to get rid of. So
yeah, I'll let Clay talk about it first. I'm the only one who's not on it. So
I have liked having it when I've had it. It has enabled the Emil combo once. It enabled me to win with a Nadu combo on the side because everyone panicked about Fnatic's ability to combo with Emil as they were talking about it. So they used their removal on Fnatic when I played my Survival of the Fittest. So I simply pivoted to a Nadu combo and won that game. I actually am looking at cutting it, however. I think it is a great card option, but I don't feel that my list needs another enabler for Emil. If it provided me with the outlet also, or more flexible mana than just straight green, I'd probably be much more interested in it. But I'm finding that as a 2-mana dork, I never want to tutor for it. If I'm tutoring for a 2-mana dork, I'm just grabbing Bloom Tender anyway. It slows me down to play it most of the time, and it doesn't really get me where I want to go.
Very fair.
Because it's only 4 mana, almost exclusively with Emil. I have used it with Soul Cauldron buffing Derevi to make it a 4-drop to great effect, but because I don't have enough ferocious enablers other than Emil, it's probably coming out of my list.
Fair. Are you on Selvala Eager Trailblazer?
No, I'm on Elish Norn as my secondary.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
He hit exactly why I'm actually not on it. Emil is my only 4-powered creature, so it only works when Emil is out. Otherwise, it's a 2-mana dork that taps for 1 green, but it can make itself into a 4/4. I never want to tutor it. I would rather play Faber Elder, Bloom Tender, anything that can tap for more than 1 mana for it. It does have a big butt. It won't die to Bowmasters. It can be a big attacker. I'm also not on Soul Cauldron in my list, so it's actively worse. But that's mostly why I'm not on it. Is mostly it's just too slow for my list, and it only combos with Emil, and I don't want to run. Or I just think it's not worth running in my list at the moment.
that's fair. We all have different playstyles. However, our next card might be good for all of us. Maybe not, though, because it's been hotly contested, at least in the Derevi server. And that is Flare of Denial. It's a 3-mana, 1 blue instant, just counter target spell. But it has the option to sacrifice a non-token blue creature rather than pay spell's mana cost. So it is a cancel, but you can play it for free. Usually, the blue creatures that we have are things like Derevi itself. As you may know, personally, I'm a big Sleep Curse Fairy believer. I want that in my graveyard. I love sacking it to this. But that's most people are not on that, so I understand why some might be hesitant. You don't want to sack a kin into this. You're not going to have Gilded Drake on your board unless someone gives it to you. There's not a ton of blue creatures to sacrifice. So that is a potential downside of this card. I do like that it can hit any spell. It's not just non-creature spells or like instants of sorceries like Fluster. Obviously, Fluster is still a wonderful card, but I like the flexibility of this, and it also can reset your commander back to the command zone should you need it, because abusing that Derevi ETB is really nice. I really enjoy doing that.
Abusing the Derevi ETB is a big part of our list. It's why I brought up the Felidar clone combo earlier. The Clone-Matic Ori combo is all about abusing that ETB. Preston is all about abusing that ETB. And we have a couple ways to get Derevi back to the command zone when Birthing Pod, Neoform, Eldritch Evolution, so that we can use it again. This card is just another one. I've been running it basically since it became legal. I have listened to the complaints of people saying it's not good. I think I've had it in my hand one time in all the times I've seen it where it was clunky at best and I didn't want to use it, but it was still able to be used to keep me from losing the game. And I did not want to tempo myself at that point. I ended up losing the game because I did have to tempo myself, but I didn't lose to the effect that was happening at the time. I've seen it compared to Pact of Negation, And where I stand on the difference between it and Pact of Negation is Pact of Negation I cannot play unless I have the 5 mana or it's my turn I'm trying to win. Flare of Denial can. I can play it on my turn I'm trying to win. I can play it if I don't have the mana to recast the Derevi right away, if I'm going to play a land, whatever. It comes online earlier. It has unique synergies with our deck. Yeah, if I was playing Sleep Curse Fairy, it would be a great sack to it, but I almost always have Derevi available to sacrifice to it. Spellseeker is in my list, and once Spellseeker's done its ETB, sacrificing Spellseeker is not a problem. I will often clone blue creatures, just like Thrasios as an outlet, or whatever. Someone Gilded Drake's your Derevi. Hey, you can sack the Gilded Drake away. It's never really been a problem for me. And I think this is one of the better counter spells available to us.
So I again am the only one who's not on Flare of Denial. My thought on it is the only blue creatures I'm on are clones, Derevi, and Spellseeker. So yeah, it's good to get rid of Spellseeker after you use the TTB. But other than that, most of the time when I clone stuff, I'm cloning like Docksides. I'm cloning value pieces. Most of them aren't actually blue most of the time, and I really hardly want to sack Derevi most of the time. The only time I really want Derevi in the command zone is when we're going for Climatic Orrery, and most of the time I can tutor a clone myself and then just Legend Rule Derevi. Other than that, I hardly ever want to sack Derevi. I think it's a big Tempest Swing having to pay 4 mana again to put it back into play. It's somewhat 4 mana to put it back into play. I think that's a big Tempest Swing to have to do that. And that's why I'm not on it. I'm also not on Force Negation either. It's kind of like this, like it's same mana cost, does somewhat similar things. Somewhat similar thought process on it. Like I'm just not like on enough like enablers for it.
Yeah, I'm not on enough blue cards to enable Force and Negation, but I have a couple blue creatures that I can sack to this, for example. So, that's why I'm on this over Force and Negation. But obviously, Force and Negation is also still a great card.
Yes.
Well, the comparison is Pact of Negation, not Force.
Oh no, I was just saying like, because I'm on Pact of Negation, but I'm also like, I want as much interaction to protect my wins as possible, and most of the time my wins include having Derevi like with my going
part
for
of
my
your
line.
engine, yeah.
So I don't want to be sacking Derevi to counter or to stop my or to protect my win. I don't want to be doing that. So but that's why I was using Force and Negation as my why I'm it's the same why I'm not on that, because I'm not running enough blue cards besides counter magic most of the time to be able to do that. Oh, and Kai'Sail Larcenist. I forgot about that. I'm also on that, but I also don't want to sack Kai'Sail Larcenist most of the time because it's shutting off my
give back the things that it's turning off, yeah. Well, if you don't want to sack a blue creature, how do you feel about sacking a white creature?
I'm a little more inclined to that. It's on my radar of stuff to try.
Up next, we have Flare Fortitude. It's 2 and 2 white. For another instant, again, you can sacrifice a non-token white creature, and until end of turn, our life total can't change, and then everything gets hexproof and indestructible. So it's like kind of a mini Angel's Grace with a heroic intervention stapled on it. However, you still can lose the game. So Thassa's Oracle, this does not beat Thassa's Oracle, obviously. But if someone is maybe dual caster mage comboing you, or etc., some sort of actual damage, then this can protect you from that.
So I don't think this card deserves a slot at all, because it is, you compare it to Angel's Grace, it's missing the two most important parts of Angel's Grace, which are split second and you can't lose the game. You compare it to any kind of board wipe protection, and yeah, it's free. Well, other than the fact you're sacrificing a creature, but we talk about not wanting to sacrifice our Derevi because it's an engine. Well, the other white creatures on our board are just as much, if not more, of an engine than Derevi because they're Emil, they're Preston, they're
Esper
Grand
Sentinel.
Abolisher, they're the Esper Sentinel's a good sacrifice outlet. There's always going to be a good one, but they're Cutzel, they're Fabro Elder, they're Ranger Captain, who you're going to sacrifice for another reason anyway. There isn't a good white creature to sacrifice to this to protect yourself with the Hexproof Indestructible. Now, we look at Hexproof and Indestructible as protection in our format. Hexproof is great for a single target removal, but we can get that same effect with the likes of Surge of Salvation, Legolas's Quick Reflexes, a counter spell that are just as good. They're not protecting us as a player so much, but you have Veil of Summer for that. They just cost 1 mana, which isn't a lot. I mean, it is a lot, absolutely. We win or lose by 1 mana. But Indestructible probably isn't going to protect your creatures. The board wipe that we see most commonly is Toxic Deluge.
Yep. And this does not do anything against that.
Correct. And because of that, the card is just missing all the important parts of the effect. Now, where I would love to see this card is some janky Adnaz deck of some sort, probably with Timna at the helm to sacrifice to it on the turn you win. But that's where I think this card might be actually see play, because the relevant part of this card is your life total can't change.
Yeah.
I fully agree. But I'll even include that in a deck helmed by Timna and something else, chances are the card quality is so high that this probably still doesn't make it.
Agreed.
So
the only reason why I want to mention it, I think it's very meta dependent. If you see a lot of dual cast or twin flame, or a lot of damage based win conditions or stuff like that, Kiki Jiki lines or something like that, it's better in those kinds of metas. And my list, like, I'm on a couple more white creature based stacks. I'm on like Dauntless, Dismantler, Esper Sentinel. Yeah, we talked about that before. There is Faber Elder. You can sacrifice you can sack your silence creatures if for some reason they're still on the battlefield and you haven't won. You can sack those creatures because they're white. Nomads is something you can also sacrifice. It's just something to throw out there. I'm on more white creatures than blue creatures, so it's a little bit more on my radar. I have a lot of Atali and stuff like that, and Crick. I have a lot of those in my meta. It's a little bit better. It's not in my list right now, but it's just something I've kept my eye on. Something maybe I want to try out if the meta leans more towards damage-based win conditions.
Doesn't Angel's Grace just do it better?
Yeah, but 1 mana versus free is also
and if you're against like a Heliod Ballista combo, they'll put you to 1 with Angel's Grace. This will keep you at your nice healthy life total. So if they only have the mana to activate once, they're like, okay, cool, you're stuffed for the turn, and you don't just die in your upkeep because they remove the less counter. But niche interaction, but something to think about.
Yeah, it's really meta dependent. That's all I really want to.
Does this stop Heliod Ballista? Because
your life total can't change, but you'll still take the damage technically.
Does that prevent the damage? Yeah.
No.
So
it's not damage being prevented.
So they still get the counter.
Yeah, they'll still get the counter.
So they'll still get lifelink, so they'll still get the counter. So it doesn't matter because they ping you, they ping everybody else, and then
everyone else is dead. Your life total stays.
The 2 white mana on your next turn.
Yeah. Correct.
As long as they have the 2 white mana, they still just win.
Yes. Now that we've covered our flares, we're not going to be covering Flare of Cultivation because we don't need 2 basics. Better in Modern.
Oh, yeah.
But we're on to the Boogeyman, the Value Engine, the second Bird Wizard, Nadu Winged Wisdom. Chances are you've seen this card. 1 green and a blue for a 3/4 flyer that says, creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn. you already know this card is busted. Nobody cares that it only activates twice each turn. You can blink Nadu, you can blink other creatures, you can reset that counter. It puts the lands into play untapped, which is insane. I've absolutely put a bunch of lands into play untapped and then cast a Nexus of Fate and just gone again. Or, usually if you get this, and we'll talk about some of its enablers here in a moment, you're looking at half your deck. You're looking at your entire deck. You're winning the game the next time you can cast spells at sorcery speed, or not even. Sometimes I know I'm on a Murn Zone. You just win the game. It's that good. If it's in the command zone, as you've seen many times, as we mentioned, you've got enablers like Lightning Greaves, Shuko, and while we certainly could run those, Shuko doesn't do anything for us outside of Nadu. Lightning Greaves does a little bit. It gives protection. It gives haste. Things we like. But I think the cards that we really want to pair this with are white cards, the Encores. But Nomads, Shaman, and Warrior, if you want. They go all the way up to 5 CMC if you're really feeling feisty. Personally, I'm only on Nomads, the 1-mana 1. Warrior Encore is a little hidden here, but it just has the same ability as Nomads. It's a 2/2. And then Shaman has the same ability, but it can also redirect the opposite way. So it'll pull in damage as well. You guys are now Nomad and Core believers, yes?
I was never not. I was questioning whether Nomads and Core would be good enough to be an include with Nadu, but I've had it in since I put Nadu in. I started playtesting it, and once we left Theory Crafting, and I never looked back. I've made some thoughts for Shaman. I actually think Shaman might be a very good include. Am I breaking up? Because I keep seeing the symbol keep popping in and out.
A smidge, but keep going.
Okay, so the thing about Nadu for our deck is that every single one of our existing combos was about getting mana and using that mana with some form of outlet, generally speaking, to draw our deck and win the game from there. Well, Nadu does that already. Just having Nadu in play is a value engine that we can target our mana dorks with our Derevi untaps, get some value, and then if we do have one of our combos and we hit our combos, we just win because Nadu causes us on every one of our combos to draw our deck, because all of our combos target and reset objects at the same time, all of our infinite mana combos. So without spending our infinite mana, we still draw our deck and can win from there with our infinite mana. Nomads as an include, or any of the Encores for that matter, as an include with Nadu, gives us a pivot. It gives us a new combo line where we get to be the secret Nadu deck. And its concession to being this combo line is quite literally one card. It's any Encore, which are non-human creatures that can be tutored by every tutor we play in some way, shape, or form, except maybe Neoform and Green Sun Zenith.
Right, but I mean, Birthing Pod to get a 2-drop 1, you can Birthing Pod a token into Nomads because they technically have 0 mana value. Obviously, Invasion of Ikoria, Finale Devastation, like you mentioned. Wargate just gets anything. We love Wargate. There's so many ways to get these out of our deck. It's what Bant does best. And the fact that you can do this at instant speed, you just automatically maximize your Nadu triggers. I would recommend doing them one at a time because you don't want to put all your Nadu triggers on the stack and then have someone interact. When you can do them one at a time, someone will go to interact in response, and then you can use your remaining Nadu triggers to dig for interaction to stop that so you don't lose your combo. It's a little slower time-wise, but, if you're a knowledgeable pilot, you can still speed this up. You shouldn't be forcing a draw because you took too long with your Nadu combo. You're not going to be making any creature tokens with your lands, etc. Spring Heart Nantuko, man lands, that kind of thing. It's you make your triggers, you dig through your cards. If it's a land, it goes to the field. If it's not a land, it goes to your hand. It's that simple. And it's not even a draw for Bowmasters, which is one of our biggest boogeymen as well.
Yeah, you brought up the only somewhat gripe I have with the card is just that it takes a lot of time to resolve. If you have a lot of creatures, it has the Seedborn Muse effect with Thrasios, where it could take up so much time depending on the pilot. I know, like, when Mox Masters was still a thing, people were talking about, like, Seaborn Muse just taking up so much time in rounds and causing it to be an issue. Like, this could potentially have that same problem, but it's so good. Like, I believe, like, most decks, unless, like, most CDH decks for, like, Derevi and stuff, should be on this package. Like, I was, like, the only one who was like, man, Nomads is, like, it has, the lowest floor, like, but it also has the highest ceiling. Like, Nomads is such a bad card on its own. It's just a 1-mana 1/1 that, like, almost does nothing. It protects itself from Bowmasters, but, like, with Nadu, it's just so crazy.
Yeah, it's fantastic. If you're a Derevi pilot out there and you haven't tried this yet, I really recommend it. You're hitting the gas. It's going to be a great time.
Even if you don't want an in-core, if you're not playing Nadu, I think you're missing out on one of our better value engines. Period. Now, if you're worried about the floor on Nomads, I've been highly suggesting Shaman, because Shaman's ability to redirect can protect any of our creatures from Bowmasters. I can pay 2 white mana to take a Bowmaster ping off of my Bloom Tender, send it to Shaman, and then if I don't want it to go to Shaman, even though it's got a 2-but, I can pay 0 and send that ping to Derevi instead, who's now got a 3-but, or Nadu, who's now got a 4-but. And essentially, I can put all of my creatures, as long as I have the mana, to 1 from lethal and protect them all from Bowmasters for as long as I have the mana, which is part of why I really like that card. I also find that card is easier to pod or neoform into as a 2-drop than Nomads is as a 1-drop. So if you don't like the floor on Nomads, I would recommend just playing Shaman or possibly playing both. The other thing I have to say on this is you suggest doing them one at a time. You're absolutely correct, unless you know there's a trick bind in play. If there's a trick bind in play, you hold priority and you stack all of them and move on. Because if you hold priority and stack all of them, they cannot get you at the split second. You will get all of your Nadu triggers except for the one that they counter, and then you'll move on.
Very fair. Trick bind is a hard thing to play around, but you basically have to know it's there via, like, a Git probe or someone just saying, oh, hey, I have trick bind. Because sometimes people will just announce what they have. I don't know why they would do that, but, maybe in response to someone else, and it's just known information at that point.
It might have gotten flipped off of something. It's a very low play rate card in our format, but it is played in our format. And it probably won't actually stop you if you play wrong into it and they counter your first one and you don't get any draws on your turn, because unless they have removal to follow it up, you just do it on the next turn. It doesn't matter.
Correct. You can do it on your opponent's turns. It's so much better than the equipment.
Oh, yeah.
But now that we've had our
8 draws.
Yes. Now that we've had our Nadu session, shall we move back to other MH3 cards?
Do we need to say anything else? We talked about Nadu. I mean,
it's also good with just Derevi triggers also. I guess we could just mention that real quick. It's good when you target your own creatures with Derevi untapped. Yeah, dorks, just anything in general. Like, it's super good. It's got 4 toughness, which I don't know why they gave it 3/4 for 3. That's absurd.
If you don't like the Nomads floor, there's something to be said for putting back in all the mana dorks that we took out when Bowmasters was printed. And yeah, you might have a bad game against Bowmasters because of it, but just those dorks alone, I mean, Kennen already plays them, Nadu already plays them. They're already surviving in the format. Maybe it was a mistake for us to go away from them. Maybe we should be looking at going back to them, but go ahead, try it. It's on my radar as another outlet for Nadu is just Derevi and dorks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, next up, we have Monumental Henge. This is a land, colorless, as all lands are. It taps for white, and it will enter the battlefield tapped unless you control planes, which isn't too much of an asking. But you can also spend 2 and 2 white to tap it and look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a historic card from among them and put it in your hand, but the rest from the bottom of your library in a random order. Just like Nadu, this is not a draw. It just puts the card in your hand. And we tend to have maybe not so many sagas, but artifacts and legendaries we have a good amount of. The thing to note about this card, because it doesn't look very assuming from the front, but it is our infinite untap outlet. Ideally, if you're running this, you have a way when you have infinite mana with Emil and Derevi, you can activate this over and over again and hopefully assemble your combo to go from there. Being land-based, you can get it with a crop rotation, etc. There's so many tutors for lands. Wargate hits lands. A lot of people don't realize that. It is a 0 mana permanent, but we're always looking for a way to have our outlet on a land, because it is what Derevi wants to do, tap and untap things. If there was an artifact that just said draw a card for no cost, cough, cough, one ring, that's why that's good. This is similar. It's just you kind of need to have the infinite mana to do things with it. If you're spending 4 mana on this is kind of a worse as Kanta. It's why I'm not on it personally. It's in my radar, but I'm not sure that I necessarily need it. There are other outlets that I prefer, but it is something to be aware of. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of in the same boat. It's on my radar. I don't like. I do think having the land outlet is very nice because it's very hard to interact with. It's just it's not good outside of being an outlet. Like that's the only like if it was like if it entered untapped, maybe I would consider this. But like
It at least taps for a white better than colorless.
yeah, at least
but...
yeah, it at least taps for a white. But like sometimes you just don't have a plains. Just having a occasional tap land that like yeah, I could spend 4 mana, double white also to draw a card almost it's a little rough.
Yeah, that's why you almost need the infinite mana.
I don't think that this is anything more than an infinite mana outlet that has the downside of possibly being a tapped land. It also does require you to play a historic card that is an outlet for your deck, which we all kind of do, but if you've already, you'd rather just have that historic card most of the time. I don't play Thrasios, so that's one fewer hits. I have to hit Ori or Nadu and be able to cast Nadu, obviously, or One Ring with this for it to be an outlet for me. I wouldn't run it because of that. I think that as Derevi pilots, we have this mythical unicorn that we're searching for, and that unicorn is a land that is also our infinite mana outlet because it gives us more tutors that can grab it, more ways to get to it, and fewer ways to interact with it in our format, because really the only real land destruction you see is Beseju.
Yeah.
And Armageddon from the random Troll Salt Armageddon deck that I'm sure still exists in CEDH, but I haven't seen it in forever. That said, this isn't card. You can see right on its typing, it doesn't say unicorn.
Very fair.
Yep.
Well, if you don't like this land, how do you feel about Shifting Woodland? Very similar, still colorless permanent, 0 mana value. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. It adds a green. It does not. It does have an ability that does not require it to tap, but you do need Delirium, and it's 2 and 2 green, and it becomes a copy of a permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. Again, you need Delirium. Activate only if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard. At least with the way my deck is currently built, for me, this is a trap. I cannot reliably turn on Delirium. That makes this a forest with downside. There are some cards that will enable this a little bit better that I'm not on, like Shorikai. I think 6 is probably a great enabler for this card, and it's a value engine that is definitely on my radar. Everyone I know that has tested 6 in our lovely bird really enjoys it. At least an 8 out of 10, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But I think this is better potentially in other decks that have more prominent permanents that are in their graveyard. You turn this into an Underworld Breach, you're cooking. You're turning this into a Agatha's Soul Cauldron that then loses all of its exiled creatures at end of turn. Not great. You want to turn it into maybe a white plume adventure. You blink it, it turns back into a land. It's maybe not the most ideal thing. Absolutely great card. I think we struggle to use it effectively, at least in the way that our decks are currently built in our playstyles.
I could agree with that. I think Clay and I were talking about this a little bit before recording, but I think you just need to have a way to either fuel your graveyard a little bit, or like build your deck to have like ways to put the 4 card types, because we have like 3 easy card types. We have land, instant, and creature. Like those are pretty easy. It's just getting that 4th type is in there. It can be a little bit difficult. I'm on Lotus Petal. We have a couple sorceries we can play. Sometimes your artifacts get countered. It does happen. Um, just having a way to get that 4th type in there can be a little bit difficult. It is a very good card. I think there are better decks that can play it. If I see this from a Derevi player, it's good. I wouldn't be like, that's not a bad card you should be playing. I will also say I think this card gets a lot better with Survival of the Fittest. I didn't think about this when I was talking about it earlier, but just being able to just survival, put your Emil in the graveyard and then have this become an Emil is also very good. It's just I tried it for like 6 games. I had it. I never had Delirium once. It's just it can be difficult to get in Delirium. Sometimes you just get it like instantly, other times it's just really, really hard.
I think it's a good card. I think it's a card you can be on. I think you have to ask yourself though, is how important is the extra effect, or am I playing this as a land with potential upside? The same reason we play Beseju, same reason we play Otawara, Minamo. These are all lands that have potential upside in different scenarios. They count them as our land base. They have low opportunity costs. The opportunity cost on this one is that you risk it coming into play tapped. Now, most of us are on Utopia Sprawl anyway. We're probably pretty well built. This one probably isn't going to come into play tapped for us, whereas Monumental Hinge very likely might have. The thing about Shifting Woodland for me is it is a toolbox card, and if you build your deck with it in mind, it's not too hard to reach Delirium. I think that what none of us did when we were playtesting it, and I think we're all off of this card right now, is I don't think that any of us really adjusted our deck with Shifting Woodland in mind. We all just kind of put it in the list and playtested it, and because of that, we couldn't really reliably get Delirium. I think I'm on the most sorceries of us, and I think that gives me the best chance of all of us of hitting it. And I don't think I ever saw Delirium. I think I saw one game that I might have wanted it and didn't have Delirium. So that's kind of where my take is on it. I think that if we were to start shifting our decks back to stack, this could become a very powerful piece within the context of our deck, because the stacks decks and the stacks cards that we might see play are going to add a number of enchantments, whether they're the enchant creatures like the Eidolon, or enchantments like Aura of Silence or whatnot that could buff up your ability to get enchantments. Because right now you're looking at instant creature land, possibly sorcery if you happen to draw one of your 4 free sorceries you might be on. I'm on 6, but even then, if I'm resolving one of those sorceries, Shifting Woodland is not a concern, because every one of my sorceries resolving is trying to win the game. Really,
Yeah, they're
I
almost
have
all creature tutor to field.
Yep.
The only one that's
yeah,
not is Savine's. We're actually on the
Savine.
exact same sorcery package. But then Savine's puts something that could potentially be a creature. Savine's also takes things out of your graveyard. So if you might lose a Delirium type.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think there might be a package to build with intuition in this, but then you don't have the sorcery because you're gonna pull this and the Savines out of the yard when you do it. So really, your choices for really getting this going are going to be Lotus Petal, which I'm not on anymore. Mystic Remora, which if you draw it and play it, it's going to die. It's going to put you an enchantment in the yard, but that's only one of our artifacts and one of our fish. And yeah, our artifacts get countered a lot, but I mean that's it. That might be the reason that Shifting Woodland is good in your deck, because you're artifact gets countered, and now Shifting Woodland is your artifact that got countered and never had to be cast. So there's definitely a potential for it, but I think we need a little bit more of an adjustment to our deck list to enable Delirium a little bit better, like you said. Possibly just Urza Saga in our land base would be good. I
I
don't know
would hit
what we grab.
enchantment, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what we grab with Urza Saga most of the time, other than like Mana Vault or something. But it's a possibility to add a quick, easy enchantment. I mentioned Aura of Silence. Aura of Silence is 3 CMC, a little expensive, but it's a good card overall for us. The ability to sacrifice it on demand is useful. So there's a few options, and I think that the thing that we never really considered with our Shifting Woodlands was those options going back in our deck with Shifting Woodlands to enable Delirium, and I think that that would actually bring Shifting Woodlands up. It is definitely a card you can play, but you need to make your choice when you're playing it. And it is a very powerful card, especially with crop rotation. It and a little bit of mana to back it up. It can be game winning. I had a game that I lost to a Shifting Woodland because a player cracked their Ranger Captain of Eos on a turn, and we responded by silencing them. On their turn, they used a Shifting Woodland to create their own Ranger Captain and crack it a second time. So
Fair.
Yeah.
it's definitely a card to consider, but you got to build for it.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a white land, we've had a green land. Let's move on to a blue land, even though this isn't really much of a land. It's Sink into Stupor. Clay, I know you're really big on this card. This is fantastic. We're back to the one blue instant spells. It's a land on the backside, which is what I'm saying. It'll shock you. I don't have the image pulled up here, but if you can have it untapped. Oh, Bolt. Sorry, it is 3. I was thinking that, but said shock because you think damage, you think shock. Been playing with shocklands for too long. But this is return target spell or non-land permanent and opponent controls to its owner's hand. And minimum, that's a Chain of Vapor that doesn't get copied. Maximum, that stops a uncounterable spell. You know, you have a Hullbreaker Horror being cast. Oh, you spent 7 mana on that? Here's 3 mana to put it back in your hand. It gets around, the spell cannot be countered. You want to stop a Niv Mizzet Perun coming down? There you go. Now, Niv Mizzet probably has a counterspell to stop you on this because that is counterspell.deck, but, you know, not many things can stop a uncounterable spell. You have Reprieve also in white, but like Raman doesn't do that because it needs to counter it. It's a rare effect that is incredibly powerful.
This card is just it's just Otawara Beseju all over again. When we're evaluating lands with abilities, it's all about the opportunity cost to play the card. And in this case, if you can afford another blue mana and you're not playing Ad Nauseam, you should probably put this in your deck. This card is not good in an Ad Naus deck, which we're not, because it's gonna bolt you. It's gonna bolt you when you add Nas and flip it because it's a 3 mana. It's a 3 CMC card. It ups your. But if you're not playing that add Nas, you're not playing black, and you're not playing and you can afford just a mono blue land in your mana base. You should be on this card. It's just another Otawara. Sure, you may never cast it because it's 3 CMC. So what? It's a land. Play it as your land. Move on with your life. You've got 6 lands in play. Hold on to it as an answer. If you use it, cool. If you don't, what did you take out of your deck? A land? It's not really any different than holding on to Otawara as an answer, or holding on to Beseju as an answer. Or I've recently gone even as far as to put a Ganjo back in because these are just cards that do good things. Yeah, this one can be countered. Those 3 can't. They have another layer of good to them. They're definitely better, but I am on 25 lands now, plus Sink into Stupor for 26 instead of 26, and I'm loving it. I don't see a reason to go back.
Yeah. Card is really good. I'm trying to find a way to slot it in. Just like it's It's kind of like not Archdra's Charm. The blue charm that's in Seas Players Modern. Like
Archmage's Charm.
yeah, Archmage's Charm. All modes are like they're like not great, but for the mana and the flexibility, it's really good. The land on its on its floor, it returns a spell. It gets around uncounterable, and it can bounce a permanent. Like it's just super flexible. Not real much more I could say. I just got to figure out how I'm going to slot it in, but I will end up playing this card.
All right. Well, we've mentioned this card a couple times, but it's time to move on to 6. This is a 2 and a green legendary tree folk. It's a 2/4 with reach. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards and you put a land card from among them into your hand, and then as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. Now, if you don't know what retrace does, it means that you can cast a spell from your graveyard as long as you discard a land card from your hand in addition to its casting cost. It's kind of like an older version of Escape. Notably, it's not when this enters the battlefield, it's when it attacks, so you need to have it sit on the board for a turn or have some sort of haste enabler, which is relatively rare. However, it is a 2/4, it's got a good body. Usually people don't look to remove this immediately until they see, oh, you have a One Ring in your graveyard that got countered. Oh, you have your Chromatic Orrery, It is probably one of the better recursion engines that we have in Bant, because usually that's a thing that's in like black. Other green effects that do this just put the card back in your hand, and this just allows you to put it back directly on the stack, provided you get that land. It also potentially can give you that land with its attack trigger, as long as you hit a land in those 3 cards it mills. If you have just a random fetch land that's in your graveyard, you won't be able to return that. But, we're on 26, 27 lands. That's a quarter of your deck. You draw, you mill 3 cards. That's not insignificant chance to hit.
Yeah, I think the card is really good. I don't think we're the best deck for it. I think Corvold is probably the best deck for it because they could just sack their dockside and then just retrace their dockside. It's really good, but I do think if your list is more mid-range to stacks, I think it's a lot better than the mid-range to turbo side of it. It's just a tad bit on the slow side, but just being able to just recast your spells is just very powerful.
I think it's a very good value engine, but I think that just like a lot of the other cards we've talked about, it requires you to adjust your deck and play around it. And I think we're all kind of on our we have 60 some odd cards the same. I don't think in our remaining 20 cards we're gonna slot in the 5 cards that are playing around 6, whether that is an extra land or an extra whatever to be able to play it. I don't know where it fits. I think it's a very good value engine, and I think if you build your deck with 6 in mind, it's a very good way to go. But I don't think we are where it wants to be with our Turbo Nadu decks. Turbo Nadu Ring Wizard, whatever our bastardized deck is nowadays.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I do think you can probably build a list with it. If you, like I said, if your list is more mid-range to stacks, I think it's a lot better than the mid-range to turbo. But Vect is really good.
I think it's just too slow.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Next up, we have Strict Serenade. Sounds a lot like 6, but is very different. This is a counterspell. It hits just 1 blue. It hits artifacts, creatures, and planeswalker spells. It's the alternative to Swan Song. Swan Song, beloved staple in our format. Personally, I think this spell is better in low-color blue decks, potentially, like us, or decks that don't have many counterspells to begin with, because of the things that it hits. It's not going to help you in a counter war, so don't expect it to do that. But hitting an artifact, like, a Kinnan casts a Basalt Monolith, or Sisay casts a Agatha Soul Cauldron. Any creature, so your Docksides, the Grand Abolishers, anyone's commander. It turns out we have some specific creatures we like in our format. Or a Planeswalker spell, you need to hit that Teferi Time Raveler from the Blue Farm player because they're trying to silence you, and it happens to not be an instant or sorcery. and they get a 2/2 bird. I think we're pretty well positioned to fight a 2/2 bird. We have a 2/3 commander that is also a bird. Doesn't trade very favorably for them. So it's not a big deal for us. Personally, I've gone up on this and Flare Denial since Modern Horizons 3 came out, and I've enjoyed it. That said, I am on the least amount of interaction compared to both of you. But that's where I say, like, oh, if you don't have a ton of counter spells, this is a very flexible option. If you're looking to be more stack interact heavy, maybe this is not where you want to be. You just want a original Swan Song along with better counter spells like Flusterstorm, Force Negation, etc., etc. But I think for what it does, it's pretty good. You want it at 1 mana. You're not casting it for free, unfortunately, but it's not 2 mana. It's not 3 mana. It's 1. So
I actually am very high on this card. It hits like a lot of stuff that you wouldn't even think about. It hits Grand Abolisher, hits Dockside, hits Metamorph, hits all the clones, hits Grinding Station, it hits what's the Defense Grid? It hits Defense Grid, Wishclaw Talisman. It hits a lot more than what people think it hits, and every time I've cast it, it has felt so good. I'm on both this and Swan Song. I think I'm actually on like the opposite side. I think most blue decks should be on this. It is very good every time I've cast it.
I'm right there with Indy. This is definitely a every blue deck should be playing it kind of card. It always has a relevant target in our format. Even countering a mana rock can be the difference in a game when someone goes to Hullbreaker Horror combo. There are, or Tidespout. There is a ton of reasons that this card always has a relevant type. Sure, could this card be better? Yeah, if it hit enchant,
It might have been too
but
good.
how many times do you see players grab their Swan Song? Yeah, well, it would have been. How many times do you see players grab their Swan Song and try to counter that artifact over there? They want to counter their One Ring with a Swan Song. Well, the Swan Song doesn't do it. This one actually does. I think that they're both very good 1 mana counters, and I think every deck with blue in it has to decide how many 1 mana counters they're playing, and then you have to decide which are best for your meta. I'm gonna bet that in almost every meta, Strict Serenade is good. It's one of the cards you want to play. I mean, we just talked about the Cowtown meta being Grixis, and every Grixis pile plays Dockside. Every Grixis pile plays Wishclaw probably. And there you go. Like, you got good targets. If they try to go in on their breach and they're super low on their first cast of LED because they're trying to go off super early, you could stop them right there. You can stop any commander-centric deck like Nadu or Sisay or whatever by just countering the commander with this and forcing them to pay that commander tax later on. It's always going to have a relevant target. It costs 1 blue. If you're playing 1 blue mana counter spells, this card should be on your list of options. In fact, it probably should be in your list, but
I do love hitting a commander that someone has Jewel Lotused out with this, because it's almost like a 2-for-1 at that point. You could hit the Jewel Lotus, but, they're sacking it anyway to cast their commander, and then you counter it on the way down. This is better than Stern Scolding in every way, I personally think, because it just hits more things. It hits any creature, it hits all artifacts, it hits all Planeswalker spells. It doesn't have to be 2 power or toughness. So if you're on Stern Scolding, then this is just a strict upgrade, a Strix upgrade, if you will. But yeah, it's pretty great. However, our next card I don't think is very great at all. We're interested in it potentially because we like lands, as we've mentioned. We're always looking for that one outlet on a land. This is Urza's Cave. It is an Urza's Cave in typing. However, it will only ever tap for colorless, or you can spend 3 mana and tap it to look for a land card that comes onto the battlefield tapped. That's rough. That's effectively 4 mana. I personally think if you're looking for that kind of effect, you just play Expedition Map. Like, obviously,
Yeah,
we're on
Well,
crop
that is so
rotation,
much
but
better.
like the fact that it comes in a play tapped, the card you search for at least, that's no good. You can't like have a big board and then like we always love to get Cradle, but unless you untap Cradle in combat after this, then you won't be able to use Cradle that turn.
well, this is a 4-mana instant speed uncounterable Cradle into play. So you do it in an end step, and now you have Cradle and you go. The question I ask with this card is, how much colorless mana can you afford to have in your mana base? And is this card good enough to be one of those cards? Right now, for me, that's Ancient Tomb and that's E-Zone, and this card just beats. It doesn't compare to either of those two.
It doesn't come even close in my eyes,
Yeah.
personally.
If I could put a third colorless land in, this one would actually probably be on my radar. It comes in untapped, it generates mana automatically, and it has this giant upside of being able to get one of my utility lands into play. And at the very worst case, it's a 4-mana gets me a land that produces the colors I need. But I don't think that's ever going to come up in a CEDH game because, well, it's never going to come up in a CEDH game.
Wouldn't pay 4
I
mana for a fetch.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it has the upside of getting any land. So, I guess if you felt you could afford more colorless mana and you were playing Talon Gates, that could be a good combo to go with this card. Which I don't think is on your list, but probably should have been on your list for cards we're talking about today because it's a good removal on a land, but it suffers the same problem. It suffers the problem of how much colorless is too much colorless, and I already have too much colorless with Soul
Mhm.
Ring and Mana Vault. If I start diluting my mana base with more colorless mana, I'm gonna find very quickly I can't cast my spells, and that's the problem. So, although one of our fellow Discord members did just top 4 their local event with this in their mana base. I don't. We'd have to ask them how they performed on it. So.
Yeah, maybe that might be something to talk about like in a future podcast, like whether or not like with this card is good or not. I think it's better in like decks that are like low color that like have like land combos, which I nothing really comes to mind at this time. They're always printing stuff. Like we get a set every month, it feels like now. So who knows? It could be good later. They might print another busted land and we would want another land tutor. It's just something to keep an eye out on.
Okay. Do we want to talk about Talon Gates for a quick second? Because as Clay mentioned, it probably should be on this list, even though I don't have the image pulled up, unfortunately. I can read it out.
We can't really abuse it.
It is
It,
not bad though, because it's so just it's a gate. When it enters the battlefield, one target creature phases out. You can add colorless. You can filter with for 1 and tap it to add any color, and then for 4 mana, you can put it from your hand to the battlefield. So even if it's in your hand, it's a 4 mana phase something out, kind of like a channel ability, like Otawara. It can hit Grand Abolisher if it's in play. It you can crop rotate into it. We have some unique ways to abuse that a little bit. You can't really blink it being a land often, but I do think that effect is at least better than I originally gave it credit for, and I think it should be on people's radars as an option.
Yeah,
it
I think it's like the same thing I was saying with this with Urza's Cave. I think it's better in lower color decks. Just having answers that you could just play in your mana base is very powerful. I actually had it played against me round 1. I was playing against Magda. Magda played it, and then they phased out my Derevi, and I couldn't counter their artifact dwarf.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the end all be all of this is something we've touched on, and Modern Horizons 3 brought us Nadu, but it's also brought us quite a few lands that we've talked about with Monumental Hand, Shifting Woodland, Sink of the Stupor, Urza's Cave, and now Talon Gates of Myra. This we are always looking for, and all of CDH in general is always looking for essentially spells stapled to our lands. making our mana base do more than it already was. Yeah, we have to play lands because our decks don't function without them, generally speaking. But at a certain point, we don't actually want any more lands in play at a certain point. And so the question here, the downside here of this land, the downside of Talon Gates is they're colorless. They both come in untapped. They both produce mana right away, which is good. But again, I've decided that in my deck, I can't afford more than 2 colorless lands. So those slots are Ancient Tomb and E-Zone for me right now. And I don't feel that either of these cards is particularly better than one of those two for me. Although possibly taking Ancient Tomb out and putting Talon Gates or even Urza's Cave in might be better for my deck. I'm not sure. I think Envy's on Gemstone. Are you still
I'm on Gemstone. I
on
actually started
Gemstone?
in, I'm still on Gemstone. I am on Ancient Tomb. Because I slotted it in for Cowtown because I won't have to fight as much aggro, and I think that's it. Brushland is my other colorless land, but that's not a colorless land.
Nope, just a pain
No, it's
land.
not.
You're not often tapping it for colorless unless you have the opportunity to.
Yep. But it's I don't know. It's like kind of like the 101st card argument for me for like all those stuff. Like, yeah, all those have really good effects. Maybe one day I'll get around. Like, I'm theory crafting a new list, with like different stuff I'm testing out. So who knows? Maybe I'll try that.
All right. Well, our last MH3 card for the day before we get into Bloomburrow is Volatile Stormdrake, also known as Gilded Drake 1.1. This is a 1 and a blue 3/2 flyer. It has hexproof from activated and triggered abilities only. Does not normally have hexproof from things like removal, etc. And it says when it enters the battlefield, you exchange control and target of this creature and target creature and opponent controls, just like Gilded Drake. If you do, you get 4 energy, and then you sacrifice that creature unless you pay it energy equal to its mana value. Chances are people know this, but it is an option. You do not have to pay that energy. You can target any creature with this. If it is larger than 4 CMC, you have to sacrifice it unless you have additional energy just waiting. But even if it's less than 4 CMC, say you really want a Tymna in the graveyard, chances are you want the Tymna on your board, but if you just really need it gone, this is a 2-mana Pongify, basically, because you can just choose to pay 0 energy and it gets sacrificed. Now, your opponent gets a 3/2 flyer. It is immune from triggered abilities, so like Bowmasters can't touch this, which is beneficial, but it's going to be on your opponent's board. So that is something to be aware of. It can't be the target of a Derevi trigger, because that is a triggered ability. There's just a number of things about this card that make it unique from Gilded Drake. It has 2 toughness compared to 3 toughness on Gilded Drake. You know, there's just some slight differences. I think some people should be either on this. I think you can be on this or Gilded Drake and be just fine. You can be on both if you'd like to double up and have some redundancy. And then I think there's arguments for and against each one individually. Personally, I'm just on Gilded Drake, but I'm just a little biased. I bought a real Gilded Drake and I spent a lot of money on the card. I want to use it. This card is just as good though, so if you don't feel like buying a reserve list card, which many people do not, Volatile Stormdrake is still fantastic. Getting control of a off-color creature gives you Bloom Tender / Fabro synergy, so that way you can then go infinite with a meal. We can do things with our opponent's creatures that are good. That's why clones are good. It's why effects like this are good. So, what do you fellas think?
So I'm actually higher on this card. I think it's better than Gilded Drake, honestly. Just the fact of you can use it as both a steal effect for an outlet or a removal spell for a creature stacked piece, or just it's so good. Every time I've cast it, I have never felt like, man, I wish this was a Gilded Drake. Like, it has felt great every time.
So the question becomes, how many creatures do you actually want to keep that are above 4 CMC? There's a lot that are
Yeah.
played, but I don't particularly care to keep somebody's Crom, for instance. And I mean, if I'm tutoring this out into a Sphinx of, consecrated Sphinx, I'm probably not going to even tutor this out. I'm probably going to tutor the clone out anyway and clone the Sphinx and, you know, have a Mexican standoff with the table. Because if you let me draw my deck, I'm gonna win against most decks that still play
As someone that has managed a stack of
the
3
Sphinx.
consecrated
So,
Sphinx going off at once, please no. I'm getting PTSD flashbacks.
Yeah.
so somebody else has to bring the Sphinx to the table. I'm not bringing the Sphinx to the table. But if I'm not gonna Storm Drake and kill it, because then they're just gonna reanimate it or whatever, and I'm going to bring a Sphinx up and say, well, okay, who wins first? And it's gonna go that way. Or it's gonna go to a draw because I can't insurmount the Sphinx. But the fact that this can be removal is super good. There's a detail I think is completely being overlooked. If for some reason you don't exchange the Storm Drake, it doesn't die. It's a 3-power flying beater that we can attack with and get Derevi triggers with. If for some reason it doesn't get exchanged. So if I try to take their value piece and they protect it, sacrifice it, whatever, or someone counters the trigger or whatever, I still have the 3/2 beater in this case, whereas with the Gilded Drake, it's gone.
True, it would
Um,
sacrifice itself, and this
Yeah.
does not do that.
yeah, and that's very niche, but I guarantee you the game that does actually happen in, you're gonna love having a 3/2 flyer to punch face with and get Derevi triggers. Not to
Oh, yeah.
mention, it's another blue creature to sacrifice too. And it's also a blue card to pitch. I personally think, in the state of our format, the correct play is to play this one, or to play both and not to play Gilded Drake by itself. And I don't think that either of those two options is wrong, but I do think this is a better first pick than Gilded Drake. If for no other reason, then I don't have to put my $300 card on an opponent's board and risk anything happening to it. I can put my $2 card on somebody else's board and don't have to worry about something happening to it.
That is a fair argument.
But that's also a bad argument, and I don't think it
Yeah.
should be your decider. I do think this card is more flexible than the Gilded Drake, and because of that, is probably where we want to be.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
All right, well, let's get into Bloomburrow, the new set coming out, because at this point, Modern Horizons 3 is old news. It's just very exciting old news. First up, we have Bloodroot Apothecary. This is a 2 and a green for a Squirrel Druid. It's a 3/3. It has Toxic 2, which is like Infect, but it does also deal damage. When Bloodroot Apothecary enters, you and target opponent each create a treasure token, notably untapped, so you're giving an opponent a mana, and you're also giving yourself a mana, so it kind of refunds itself a small amount. But whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-creature token, that player gets 2 poison counters. So they can sacrifice up to 5 non-creature tokens. These abilities do use the stack, so it will go on top of that. So if they have like a Born Upon a Wind, they don't care. However, this will maybe not stop, but deter maybe a Dockside from going off and comboing. Tivit is probably going to hate this card because they want to sacrifice their clues and their treasures, and they want to activate their time sieves. Time sieve itself just kills you because you sacrifice 5 artifacts.
Well,
But it does need to be tokens
possibly.
specifically.
Yeah, this is just a cute stacks piece. I don't think this belongs in our format. Maybe if you're playing mono green or red green or something without blue, I don't think this is, or without white, or I just
Yeah, I'd
don't think
much
this
rather have
belongs in our
Alishnar
format.
and Mother of Machines instead of this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a cute stacks piece, but I don't think it, or a punish piece. It's a punishment piece, but I just don't think it has a place in our format.
I think it's I think it's a very meta dependent card. If you're playing against a lot of Teamer Sabertooth Dockside loops, playing against a lot of Tivit, I think this is a fine card you can put in.
It doesn't have
Otherwise,
flash.
yeah. Otherwise, I think it's kind of a trap.
I think the only deck that could play this is Yiva.
Yiva or Jetmir. I could see Jetmir playing this too.
Yeah.
It's just not our deck. It's not
No.
where we want to be. We have better options. You've got Elish Norn, you've got Dauntless, you've got Blind Obedience. We've got tons of white cards that affect the same things as this. And now, if this said sacrifices a non-creature instead of a non-creature token, I'd give it a second look. But with it saying token, I wouldn't give this a second look. The only deck that we might struggle with that this has value against is Tivit, and we just fight Tivit on the other axis. Just steal the Tivit, or
clone
counter
it or something,
or counter their time sieve or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as you mentioned previously, we're always looking for lands with outlets. Notably, this one does not say unicorn on it as you were looking for, but we have Fountain Port. Colorless land, taps for a colorless. You can spend 2 and tap it to sacrifice a token. You can draw a card. You can pay 3, tap it, pay a life to make a fish token, or pay 4 to make a treasure token. Again, the only time I ever see anyone using this is if you have infinite mana, you can pay 4, make a treasure token, untap it, pay 2, sacrifice it, the token that you just made, which is the treasure, and then draw a card. It doesn't do anything outside of that. It's a colorless land, you know? I don't, and I'm never going to be making a 1/1 blue fish creature token like
as an outlet. Yeah. As an outlet, this one is probably better than Hinge as our unicorn that we're searching for, but it's colorless. Paying 2 and sacrificing a vampire from our Charismatic Conqueror to draw a card actually isn't bad in normal play, just having it there. But realistically, it all falls back to the same question: how much colorless mana is too much in your deck? This is a land. This is the closest our unicorn has ever been to being an actual unicorn. I don't think it's where we want to be. To be honest, I think the white one from Lord of the Rings is probably better as just a strict unicorn outlet.
Meanest Earth.
Yes, is just better because as long as you've attacked with 2 creatures, which is not hard for our deck, you get to draw cards. Or I think that's the one I'm thinking of. But either way, those 2, Minister Earth and the other one, those are probably better. Those are whatever. I don't see a value for this. I don't struggle with outlets, generally speaking. We have tons of them. We go around. I don't think having an extra outlet on a land would help me have outlets in the games that I struggle with outlets, because most of those lands have drawbacks. They only produce a single color, or they produce colorless, or they risk coming into play tapped, or that I wouldn't even have had them in play unless I naturally drew them, and I didn't naturally draw an outlet anyway, so what difference did it make?
Yeah. I just think this land is like super close. If it had any sort of relevant text, I think we would probably play it. Just like the sack token is not going to be relevant enough. Creating a 1/1 fish for 3 mana, not good. 4 mana for a treasure, it's not good either. We're getting there. It's almost there for our land. It's just not there.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's just not enough. So we're not going to be making a 1/1 fish token for ourselves. But how do you feel about giving one to an opponent? This is Into the Floodmaw. It's a 1 blue instant. You can gift a tap fish. This is a new mechanic in Bloomburrow. It is basically an additional cost. However, the spell does have to resolve in order for this effect to happen. So if it gets countered, your opponent does not make a fish. And this is return a target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If you promise the gift, you can still hit a non-land permanent an opponent controls. So notably, it only hits opponent's things. You cannot bounce your own things for value. So it's not as good as Chain of Vapor, but also you're not going to get copied or bounced, etc. And it is still 1 mana. So And a tapped 1/1 is, I mean, that's better than Forbidden Orchard, even, you know, 'cause that's an untapped 1/1 for 1 mana. This is, you're spending a mana and they get a tapped one, and what is most decks going to do with a 1/1 blue fish creature? Let's be real.
Stack up the
Sacrifice
calling
it
the
to
weak.
flare.
Non-token, you cannot sacrifice
I
it.
know,
Flare.
I know that was the joke.
Yeah.
This is probably a blue staple. This is, you have to decide what your interaction suite looks like. I tend to favor removal for my creature answers instead of bounce, because we live in a world of dockside, and sometimes removing the dockside is good, but bouncing the dockside is never good. Removing the bowmaster is good, but bouncing the bowmaster is usually never good. So I tend to favor the removal that is a little bit more flexible. I do have some bounce removal in Sink into Stupor. I do have some bounce removal in Cyclonic Rift, but we both know why those cards are better for the slot than Flood. If I wanted to build my deck with Chain of Vapor, I'd definitely consider putting this in over like Swords or Path or something else, because it can remove a stacks piece, it can kill a creature, it can bounce a creature, and the drawback of giving a fish is nothing. It's non-existent drawback. So it's definitely a blue staple. It's definitely something to have in your interaction arsenal, but I wouldn't say it's a play this card.
So I'm actually thinking about swapping out Path for this, because just being able to answer anything for a
Yeah.
1/1 fish instead of having just two hard creature removals, because I'm already on Swords to begin with. I think it's probably a good swap. I think it's probably what I'm gonna do when this comes out. Just being more flexible with your removal, pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely a conscious decision and should be considered to be played. I just don't think it's an auto include. I think is this the correct answer for you for what you want to do with your deck? So
I will add that Bloomburrow releases upon us soon, or at least pre-release. We're recording this the Tuesday before pre-release starts. It's this weekend. It's gonna be out very soon. So if I wasn't missing the tournament I was supposed to attend this weekend, I had Bloomburrow cards in consideration. Not this one, notably, but not even our next one. But our next one is Lily Splash Mentor. This has been making a splash, so to speak. It's 2, a green and a blue for a Frog Druid. It's a 4/4 with reach.
it's drop.
And for 1 blue and a green, you can blink something, and it comes back with a +1/+1 counter. It can only activate it as a sorcery. This is Diet a Meal. I know a lot of people compare this to Sabertooth, which is very relevant because you're probably blinking Dockside with this. We can't play red, so obviously we can't do that. But activate only as a sorcery is really not that big of a downside. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst thing ever. You still have a silence effect, that's fine. You don't have to recast the thing like with Sabertooth. Personally, I don't really like the fact that this is 1 blue-green. It makes it hard to untap 1 permanent and, effectively generate mana off of this because of the 2-color restriction. Obviously, Emil is just 3 generic mana at any type. Now, it's not impossible. We have Kinnan and Bloom Tender. We have filtering with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. We have options. And I think if you wanted a second Emil effect, this is pretty good.
I think this card is a trap. I think if you're looking at this card, you should be looking at Eldrazi Displacer instead. You should be looking at Eldrazi Displacer instead if you're looking at this card. The comparison to Temur Sabertooth is relevant, and I think that for our format, it will be played in those decks that can afford it because they have blue also with Temur Sabertooth loops, because it's cost 1 more mana than Temur's. No, actually, it costs 1 less mana than Temur Sabertooth. And it's only activated at sorcery. Well, guess what? Your Temur Sabertooth loop is probably only doable at sorcery too, most of the time. So that's where I see this card making its splash. It is not for our deck. Generally speaking, any of the things that are going to allow you to tap it to make the mana are going to be able to do it, because the only way you're going to make that 3 mana and use Lily Splash is with Bloom Tender or Fabro plus a one of our classic doublers like Preston or Delny or whatever else, or you're going to have to be using Chromatic Ori, or you're going to have to be using Agatha Soul Cauldron to filter. And if you've got Ori or Soul Cauldron in play to filter mana colors, it doesn't matter anyway. This doesn't work with Cradle. It doesn't work with your Mana Vault. It doesn't work with your... It literally only works with Bloom Tender and Fabro and a doubler of some sort. Well, one of our value doublers, whether that's Kennen, Delny, Preston, Mom. Did I miss one?
No, I think that's
Most of them, if not all.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I think this is a trap. It's very, I think it's very good for like the Dargo Thrasses, the teamer decks that want this. I know I'm probably going to be playing this in Rog Thras when I eventually get around to playing that deck again. But this is just too much of a restriction that the green blue colorless on it is just a little too rough. And also, this does, yeah. I don't think this works with Delny either, because if you flicker Derevi, it re-enters with a 1/1 counter either, so it won't trigger it twice.
Yeah,
which makes it a lot more difficult to combo with like a lot of our enablers.
It does. I did just actually think, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to think this, this is probably not terrible with Earthcraft, actually. But that's not often a thing we do. Like you mentioned, Rog Thras very much wants to be an Earthcraft deck. Would like this a lot. Obviously, bouncing a Dockside is very cool. But, you know, you bounce the thing, you use Earthcraft to tap it, and you untap one of the, either a forest or an island, and it reduces your effective cost by one of your colors, and then it's easier to go off with that. But since we don't do that, that's not really where we want to be. We have better ways to tap things. We're Derevi, you know, we're the best at untapping things. So, yeah, I don't think this is where we need. Maybe we're wrong. Who knows? That's the best part of previews.
I love being wrong.
I think
prove me wrong.
Yes, please prove me wrong too. I think you should be on Eldrazi Displacer first, though.
Yeah.
Displacer has the added benefit of being able to tap down opponent's creatures too.
Oh yeah.
Next up, we have a funnier card, and that's Murmuration. This is a 4 and a white enchantment. It's out of the commander decks. And it says, birds you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, for each spell you've cast this turn, create a 1/2 blue bird creature token with flying named Stormcrow. I'll tell you now, you can get these tokens out of sets like Unglued, I believe it was. It's an unset.
Unstable,
that's what it is. I don't do unset stuff. Personally, if I was going to run this, I'd be getting the 7th edition foils because they're beautiful. But chances are, if you're casting infinite spells to get infinite Stormcrows, you're probably already winning the game. It is interesting. Guys. Go ahead, Clay.
We have made our obligatory Stormcrow joke for wizards, for birds. Can we move on to real cards now, please?
I do want to. Yeah, I agree, but I do want to know birds you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. The vigilance is not bad. At 5 mana, it's pretty terrible. But this does make Derevi a 3/4. It makes Nadu a 4/5 because that makes sense. But there's just so many other things you want to be doing.
Till end of turn, then you have to pass through 3 turns before you get to use them.
You could go off with Blasting Station again. Not good, but that's your option. For someone that wants to play Bird Tribal.
Oh my god! I just came up with the biggest brain play. Okay, so you have this, and then you have Nadu. You can slam your Fanatic of Ronus, and then it taps for 4 mana.
Yeah,
because you got Barrage to stop your Nadu.
Won't do anything specifically, but yes, you could.
Yeah. It gives.
I mean, did anybody notice that Lily Splash Mentor was a 4-power, thus enabling the?
But you don't have blue. You know, it's rough.
The Fanatic that exactly.
Anyways, an actually good card that's not this is Polywog Prodigy, and this is a card that I'm definitely going to be running. It's a 1 and a blue frog wizard. Maybe not a bird wizard, but I'll take a frog wizard. It has Evolve. I learned recently that Evolve is also whenever another creature enters, and if it has greater power or toughness, I thought it was just power, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Polywog Prodigy's power, you draw a card. This is so if Lily Splash Mentor is Diet a meal, this is Diet Talion. You don't get the attrition value of the 2 life, but you do get a card. It's not a May, and so notably, it is also explicitly less than. So at first, when it first enters, it has no counters. You only hit on 0 cost non-creature spells. And that may not sound like a lot, but we play a format with a ton of fast mana. You want to play an LED? Sure, I draw a card. You want to play a Chrome Mox? You want to play a Mana Crypt? Etc., etc., etc. You draw cards. Derevi is a 2-power creature. It can grow the Polywog by 1. And that means you get both 0 and 1. Notably, Talion cannot be 0, but it also can't be multiple numbers. You get a second Evolve trigger. I mean, almost every Talion plays 1 or 2. I don't see Talions picking 3 or higher anytime. And so they would love if they could do 1 and 2 and 0. Basically, anytime your opponent casts a non-creature spell, you're drawing a card. That's fantastic. It's a little harder to get the second trigger for us for Evolve, but certainly not impossible. I mean, we've mentioned things like Emil. We've mentioned things like Selvala, Eager Trailblazer. If you flip your Invasion of Ikoria, that's an 8/8. It's likely, not going to be your relevant Evolve trigger because now you have an 8/8 that redirects damage. But, it's not impossible. Unlikely, maybe a little bit. But you get that on 2, and you are absolutely flush with cards, I guarantee.
Nadu also triggers it because why not?
That's true. Yeah. It would be if you get 1 trigger, it'd be a 2/4, and then Nadu would be a 3/4. So yeah, absolutely. Nadu's a great.
Hutzel, Nadu, any of our 3-power dudes, Ranger Captain. This card is it belongs in your deck. It's a good draw engine. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, but 0 isn't very good." Well, 0 is the exact same reason we play Mystic Remora. Mystic Remora has other applications later, but so does this. But we play Mystic Remora to play it early and get a bunch of cards off everyone's free mana rocks that they're racing out. This card does the same thing. It gets you cards off of the Pact of Negation that people are going to try to protect their spells with. It gets you cards off of all those 1-mana spells. It gets you cards when someone tries to LED loop with their Breach. Now, admittedly, this is not a May draw, so if you don't have a way to deal with that, they're just going to kill you while they Breach loop, but that's a whole other conversation. I mean, you're probably just going to draw into your Mindbreak Trap and Mindbreak Trap away their whatever important thing and move on with your life. But it's
also, if you're getting Breach looped, then you might just be dead anyway. So
right, exactly. It's draw. Draw is one of our big things. This card might seem like it's going to not draw you cards, but there are times when Esper Sentinel doesn't draw you cards. There are times when your Archivist of Ugma, that a lot of Derevi players are still playing, doesn't draw you cards. This is going to be more reliable than your Archivist of Ugma, and probably more reliable than your Esper Sentinel, to be completely honest with you. Esper Sentinel early is going to draw you a couple cards, but then they're going to start paying for it because it's only 1 spell a turn that gets taxed. This is a good card. This is a card that I want to play. I haven't figured out what I'm cutting for it yet, but this is a card I'm going to be playing, and it's probably going to be my deck for a long time.
I think it's either this or a certain otter that we're going to be talking about in a little bit might be the best card in the set.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am incredibly sad. I cut Stasis for this card. I really want to keep Stasis. That is maybe not. It's better to include Polywog for sure. It's the correct decision, but my heart yearns for Stasis.
Stasis wins games. Card draw wins games. Stasis wins games with enablers. The thing about pulling stasis and why I pulled stasis and why I'm hurting the same way you are, because I really want to put stasis back in, is when I switched to Nadu, I upped my creature tutors a bit, and my stasis enabler count dropped. The only stasis enabler, other than vigilance creatures, and I'm not going to talk about vigilance creatures, because vigilance creatures are just that. The only stasis enabler I have left in my deck is Delny, and if I'm trying to pull something for Delny and stasis, why am I not just trying to win? Because Delny is that good. When I had more enablers, stasis was winning me games, but the statistics say stasis is a bad card.
My
for
heart
us,
yearns for stasis. I agree with you, but
makes
the
me
heart
sad.
yearns for bad decisions.
Yeah.
Anyways, as requested, we got an otter. Flash Otter, Valley Floodcaller, 2 and a blue. It's an otter wizard. We're getting a lot of wizards this set. I'm very okay with that. My Caverner Souls is happy. This itself does have flash. You may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, all your birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and they get untapped. Now, personally, the only birds I'm on is Derevi, Nadu, and Birds of Paradise. Frogs would be just Polywog. Otters would be just this, I believe, and I'm not on any rats. I don't care about the +1/+1. I'm going to be honest with you. However, untapping them, you untap a Birds of Paradise every time you cast a non-creature spell? Yes, please. I have Agatha's Soul Cauldron out. I put a Bloom Tender ability on like this or Derevi or something else. I don't really like to put it on Derevi because you want to blink Derevi usually, but it's an option. Anytime you cast a non-creature spell, you get multiple mana. Yes, please. Holy, that's so good. And you can cast them as though they had flash. I can cast my Chromatic Aura using my combat mana. The thing we do best is make mana in combat, and we're limited by sorcery speed things, and all of a sudden that's no longer a restriction. This is insane. I mean, a lot of people slept on Born Upon a Wind for a long time, but now everyone's like, oh, that's one of the best cards out of Lord of the Rings. This is just Born Upon a Wind light. We're just really getting diet everything in this set. And I am so happy to have this card.
For this card, this card's cracked. It's very good. Okay. I don't think our deck is the best for this card. Mostly just because we're mostly a creature-based combo. But it's still
if
very good.
If it was all spells, I'd be even higher on it. But I'll take what I can get.
For sure.
Because it says non-creature, I don't think this is the card we want to be on. Now, please, prove me wrong. But I think that proving me wrong is going to actually be the third ability on this card showing its face. And that untap them. If this card proves to be really good, it's going to be that ability that makes it good. That's my assessment of this card. The flash is good. The non-creature spells as though they had flash is also really good. If that's the effect you're looking for, there are other ways to do it that are probably better for our deck. The 5 mana Teferi, the
Mage of Zephyr.
Yeah, Mage of Zephyr. Yiva are the
creature enablers for flash. Yeah,
the Planeswalker creature enablers for flash are probably better for the slot. The fact that this has flash by itself is good. The fact this is a creature by itself is good. I just don't think that the giving flash to our non-creature spells is what we actually want. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. It's definitely still good, because I'm sorry, casting my creature tutors at instep and holding up mana for an entire turn cycle to interact is way better than not doing it that way. So again, absolutely good, 100%. But I think the thing that's going to sell this card into our decks, that's going to be play this card, is how well you are abusing that third ability.
You're correct in that it's very good, and I think people are sleeping on it, but even so, I still want to cast my Finale of Devastation, my Invasion of Ikoria as an instant speed. My Wargate, yes please.
Yeah, I'm not... there's no argument here. I just, it's the same thing I said with Nomads. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying, is it worth the slot? And find it worth the slot. It's not Polywog for me. It's not this card goes in the deck. It's, is there a slot for this? So
I think it's like the best of both worlds between like Teferi and Born, because this being a creature, being able to tutor creatures is very good. Being as costed as what it is very good. Just not being able to cast everything with flash is like the only downside to the card. But like just having this in play, or like just like we're getting closer to that flash enabler that we really want, that creature, like just like the generic flash enabler. It's gonna be great. I do think this card is probably the best card, like probably the best commander card in the set. Mostly just for like the rock size and the blue farms and all the blue like just being able to just go on top of other people's wins is going to be like even worse than what it already is. I think depending on like I know some people were brewing around with the kitten version of the deck. I think this card with kitten is going to be like super good.
Yeah, it's gonna be silly.
Yeah.
I mean, people are checking Paradise
absolutely.
Mantle
And
into things, so you put Paradise Mantle on this.
yeah, absolutely. And that's where it goes back to, I really do think the power of this card is going to be, it's already strong. It's definitely possibly worth a slot. The power of this card is going to be how well you use that third ability, really.
Well, all right. What else do we have to talk about?
We have one last Bloomburrow card. We have Whiskervale Forerunner. It is 3 and a white. Mouse Barge, non-legendary. It's a 3/4. And it has Valiant, which is this set's version of Heroic. Whenever Whiskervale Forerunner becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them. If it's your turn, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it on the battlefield, put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is what they should have done to Nadu.
Yeah.
However, they didn't. And, well, Envy, tell me why we're talking about this card.
Okay, so the reason why I want to talk about this card, mostly just because it's a 4-mana outlet that you can pod your Derevi into, or Neoform your Derevi into after you make your infinite mana. It is, if you're running a creature-based outlet, you can just keep using your infinite mana with your Emil. Like, I've had a lot of times where I assemble the Derevi Emil combo, and then have, like, a birthing pod in play, but like no other creatures to be able to pod. So I'm doing the tap loop until I find a way to win. This lets you pod your Derevi away into the win. It lets you target, continuously flicker it to be able to just like get your other infinite mana. Like I'm running Thrasios, so this gets my Thrasios, which lets me draw my deck. This gets your Nadu, which lets you draw your deck. This gets you Cannon, which lets you flip into stuff. Like, and like on the floor, you can use one of your untapped triggers to target it to like potentially cheat a creature into play. Like it's my list specifically, I'm on 5 creatures that it can't hit. And right now I'm on 29 creatures, so 24 of those are hits out of a 99 card deck. That's roughly a fourth of the time it's going to at least hit something. Like just being able to cheat mana costs into play can be also very good. I think it's worth like talking about. I'm probably going to test it, see if it works. I think it's like not terrible.
It's got potential. Absolutely. It's an outlet. Outlets are always deciding which ones you want to play. I do like this one being able to put things into play. There's no spell casting involved with it. I'm not sure if it's the outlet I want in my deck, but it is definitely an outlet. And a lot of the unsolved mystery of Derevi, and what we probably should talk about at some point, is how many outlets versus how many combos are in our decks. And it's kind of important because our Derevi deck is really good at making mana, but we have disadvantage that players playing things like Ardent Thrasios don't, is that they have their outlet in the command zone, so they can just jam a bunch of infinite mana combos. Whereas we don't need to jam a bunch of infinite mana combos because we have the infinite mana in the zone. So we need the outlets in our deck, and outlets like this one that bring extra value, like the potential to freely cheat a creature into play, or heck, if I have a Worldly Tutor and a Derevi untap, I'm going to town. Type scenario is definitely a something to look at. It's definitely something to be on the radar, and I think that that's a good reason to put this card on the radar. Am I going to start playing it right away? Probably not. Am I going to be watching your testing? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's probably going to be probably once I get through this new wave of this list I'm testing, it's probably going to be on the next wave.
Like you said, you'd love to be proven wrong. Well, I'd like to be proven wrong about this card. Show me that it's good, please.
Yeah. This is my probably my one card that I'm just like, I think this card is not that bad, and I like having I've been looking for a card to where I can just pod my Derevi and into the outlet, and this does that. This is the card I've been looking for a while.
All right. Well, that wraps up our Bloomburrow card discussion. And this has been episode 2 of the Birdbrain podcast. We've hit another 2-hour mark. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you have any suggestions, things we missed, things we're wrong about, tell us why we're wrong in the comments. We'll be in there watching and responding to you guys. So hopefully, you can use this to better your knowledge of Derevi and new cards coming out, because these are the best sets we've had for Derevi in a long time. So hopefully you can find some more success playing our favorite bird.
If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're always around. Happy to talk about the bird.
Yep, we'll have our deck lists in the description. We've got primers for the most part. Currently, Clay's is the best primer, but I'll be working on mine here pretty soon as well, because I got to update mine. So